So what I'll do is we'll do a quick overview of our previous class. We'll just go over it, and after that we will move into today's topics. If you remember the previous class, we discussed what when a term has a suffix like ity or ism or zation, what does it mean? I told you when it is ending with ity, it refers to either the state or the condition of a particular entity or a phenomenon. I also told you when a word is suffixed with ism, it refers to usually a belief, a worldview, a philosophy, or an ideology. It's a way of looking at things, a perspective. I also told you that how when a word ends with the suffix zation, it refers usually to a process. I gave you examples of say like modernization, modernity, and modernism, or any other word, liberalization, liberalism. You can use this rule to understand any term. Like I said, because UPSC is constantly checking the clarity of thought that you have, and by knowing exactly what the term means, you will not end up writing all other things. You will stick. So it's basically like how close to the bull can you hit? It's like taking an aim and shooting. The closer to the bull, the more score you get. I also told you some key terms that are relevant to this chapter, such as revolution. I said revolution in simple terms is a sudden and fundamental or total change. One, it has to be sudden, it has to be drastic, it has to be a very quick change, and it also has to be a total change. It has to be like a big change. Only then you call it a revolution. I also told you about reason. I told you reason is a process through which our understanding is increased through sensory experiences, through empirical evidence. I also told you about Renaissance. I told you how Renaissance refers to a revival or a reinvention of art and architecture and literature of the ancient times. In the European case, it is classical art. Um, then you have the word enlightenment. Renaissance refers roughly from 14th, 15th, 16th centuries. I told you how the church from Dark Ages, because they thought it will help glorify or it will help build the image of the church, they actually allowed artists and sculptors to revive the ancient traditions. But in doing so, the artists like Leonardo da Vinci, like Michelangelo, also discovered new ideas in science and philosophy, and they started discussing and writing these things. In doing that, these ideas propagated over time and they started taking root. And by about 17th and 18th century, so 14th, 15th, 16th, you can roughly say is the time of Renaissance. And Renaissance is mostly centered in Italy. The second centers were Portugal, Spain, and France. But by the time you move to Enlightenment, the center becomes, because these ideas, now I'll be discussing, that is what today's lecture is, the scientific ideas of enlightenment, the faith in reason, in progress, and the faith in the human ability to understand the natural laws and to manipulate and use them to improve the human condition. So that is the faith of enlightenment. That is the age of reason or age of enlightenment. That is what we did the previous lecture. These were the key terms. We went into detail about the very definition of what modernity stands for, and I discussed several things. I discussed how there are changes in attitudes in modernity, there are changes in institutions, there are political institution changes, there are economic institutions which change. I told you about the joint stock exchange company, I told you about banking, I told you about factories, I told you about industries, I told you about new cities. Each of this in today's lecture we will be discussing in detail. We will actually be opening these each of these concepts: industrial revolution, commercial revolution, um, French revolution. It's a political revolution. So each of these today we will go into their history and what changes they brought about in society, because that is modernity. And sociology was born as a response to these changes that were brought about due to modernity in Europe. I'll repeat, sociology was born to engage with, to respond to the social changes that came about as a consequence of modernity in Europe. To study those changes, sociology was born. So, what are those changes is something, in detail. This definition is literally what we will break today from attitudes, which is a consequence of scientific revolution and new ideas, change, change ideas and change attitudes in individuals. Institutions also change. Technological revolution happened, that also changed. So we will discuss roughly these things. And remember the last part of this definition, which says modernity changes its vantage point from looking into the past, into tradition, um, into religion for truth. It turns forward and it looks into the future. It attempts to make the future better. It there is a 180-degree shift there. Yeah. So then last time I said that society and ideas have a, I will be using a new term today. It is called dialectical. This is again a key term in sociology. We will keep coming to this term again and again. For now, just know that society and ideas are engaged in a way that they are constantly making each other. They are constantly rubbing against each other. Idea is influencing the society, and ideas are always a product of that society. So ideas will always be born in a particular social context, and that social context is that society. Similarly, ideas then transform. So they are constantly changing each other. They are constantly engaging with each other, and they are in some ways they constitute each other. We have then rise of reason and critical inquiry. I told you how enlightenment led to the rise of reason, the faith in reason. Reason refers to the human capacity. It is absolutely the human mind that can, through observation, through empirical evidence, it can arrive at what is right, what is true, what is right knowledge, valid knowledge. So it can produce that knowledge. So it challenged. Now, with the faith of this reason, two institutions were primarily challenged because most until then, what is true and what is right came from these institutions. One is the king, the laws made by the king, the state, and the other is the church or the religion. They both decided what is right and what is true. Now, once reason began to grow and the faith in reason began to grow, we noticed that there is a critical attitude towards both these institutions. So, in fact, today we will discuss in detail how the philosopher Locke, John Locke, is the one who challenges both these institutions in his works. And he says how every individual has a right to his conscience, okay? And nobody can tell him what is true and what is right. He has to arrive at it by himself. And therefore, the authority of both the state and the church is challenged. We will go into the detail of that part. But yeah, the two subpoints is that religion and secularism, the society turns more secular and away from religion, from fundamental blind beliefs and stuff like that. And there is also a shift from um, despotic monarchy, so where the ruler thinks they can do anything, which was what the situation was during Louis the 16th in French society in the 18th century, where by that time the monarchy became so despotic that they were not bound by rules. They were doing as they pleased, and then I told you how the works gave birth to social contract theory. Social contract theory says every man was born free in the state of nature, and we all consented, we all came together and made a contract, an agreement to give away a part of our rights so that each individual's lives are bettered. Now, by giving a part of my right to just kill and snatch and take, I I create another third party who is sovereign, who will reign upon all of us in a way that we don't kill each other, and that way I am more secure, you are more secure. We have guarantee that you will not come and kill me, I will not come and kill you, and that is a good thing. And that is how the social contract was made. This is the idea that was developed by 18th century, 17th century philosophers like Montesquieu, Locke, Hobbes, and Rousseau. These, I told you last time, how ideas propagate from philosophical treatises to popular media and then to kitchen talk, everyday talk between common folk. And by the time this reached the common folk of the French society, it gripped them because they were reeling under poverty and extreme harsh conditions created by the church, the clergy, and the state, the king. So only the royalty and the church, which was less than 2%, were enjoying the wealth and hard work of the remaining 98% of the society. The society were influenced by these ideas. They said, we want a new rule. We will create our own rule. And new ideas came. As a consequence, eventually democracy came. This part also we will be discussing in detail today. We will go into the actual history of French Revolution, and each of these words, like the slogan was liberty, equality, and fraternity, something which we have in our Indian constitution. That phrase is there in American constitution. It is today there in almost every constitution of the country. The first time these words were used was during the French Revolution. The slogan of the French Revolution was liberty, equality, and fraternity. So we are going to discuss each of those words in detail and how that went into creating the modern Europe and the conditions for modern Europe. And it is in response to study those conditions that sociology was born. I also told you that a good part of enlightenment, a good part of the intellectual changes that were happening in that period were scientific in nature. There were changes or there were advances in the field of biology, in terms of medicine, but also in terms of more theoretical advancements like the theory of evolution. I told you that the theory of evolution has two main tenets. One is natural selection, and the other is survival of the fittest. But one thing that you need to understand is the idea that every species or every successive generation is the best, only the fit will survive, which means whatever, so which means eventually species are going to get better and better. They're going to get more and more fitter to their environment because only the fit survive, the rest are going away. So every with time, it is just the species is only getting better. This idea is important. This is the root for an idea called progress. We will discuss that in the later part of the lecture, today's lecture. We also went into physics. Yes, I told you about Copernicus. I told you about Galileo. I told you about heliocentric theory, that it is not the sun that revolves around the earth, but it is the earth that revolves around the sun. I told you how scientists initially had to pay heavy price, even price with their own life, uh, for propagating these ideas. Anyway, soon after that, Newton builds on the work of Galileo. He literally takes Galileo's notes and works from there. And he develops mechanics. He develops the Newton's laws of motion. By now, this faith in science, this faith in reason, this faith in as Newton developed his laws, and the application of those laws are machines. The applications of those laws are machines, and when common people started watching machines, that they are able to do work which took human beings several days, machine can do it in few hours. When you witness that firsthand, there is a deep faith in technology and in science. Okay, and so there is a further acceptance of science as a new philosophy, or there is a faith in science, and from faith in religion and the church, it moves to faith in science because they are seeing that science is improving their lives either through instruments and machines or through medicine. So that is about physics, and then you also have chemistry. You by now have both the Boyle's law and the Charles law, which are basically how gases um, increase or the volume of gases increases or decreases according to changes in temperature or pressure. So if you increase pressure, the volume will reduce. If you decrease pressure, it will increase. Similarly with temperature. Now, temperature also the same thing. If you increase temperature, volume will increase, and if you decrease temperature, the volume of a gas will decrease. These are important because this leads eventually to the steam engine. Because in steam engine, which is the first form of engine, basically what happens is water is turned into vapor by heat, and vapor expands or volume increases. And when the volume increases, the piston is shot up. And when a piston is shot up, so basically imagine there's water, you heat it, there is gas, just like your pressure cooker, like the whistle goes off, the piston goes up. When the piston goes up, there is a crankshaft, it is attached to the wheel. When the piston goes up, the shaft moves and the wheel rotates. That's how the first engines were made. It's a very simple process. You can look it up, Google it. Okay, just crankshaft and piston. So this is the mechanics of it. And but while this movement is mechanics, it is based on physics. This that volume increases the gases, and then that is still chemistry. And also by then, hydrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, these gases were discovered. Their uses, their relevance for combustion, things like that were already discovered, and these were also important to building the technologies that were essential for industrial revolution. These were part of the technological revolution. Finally, some of these things have also changed geography, because now we understand, because of this, again, Charles' law and Boyle's law, you are now able to understand why are winds blowing in particular ways. When you do your geography general studies, you will realize that the reason why winds blow in particular ways are actually because of temperature and pressure. The sunlight falls on a particular region on the landmass or on the sea, and that heats up. And because of the temperature, the atmosphere there, the air there either ascends, it goes up because pressure is decreased. So basically, it is a game of temperature, pressure, and atmosphere, which is gases, air. So all these three are playing. Because of the advances there, geographers, until then, geographers only described there is a hill there or the wind blows from here to there. They didn't know why. But once Charles' laws and Boyle's law come, geographers figure out, oh, this is why winds are blowing in this particular direction. Once you are able to understand why winds are blowing in particular direction, until then, they just know winds blow in this direction in this time of the year. Now you know why. Once you know why, you are able to manipulate that to your advantage. Navigation improves, navigation drastically improves, and navigation is essential for colonization, because only with that super navigation skills do you have the colonization that happens. Of course, I mean, colonization was happening even while these theories and these scientific revolutions were happening. But once the steam engine comes, the ship is not at the mercy of the nature, at the mercy of winds to take. The ships are propelled by the steam engine. Steam engine is run on coal. For those of you who don't know, for a long time in India, our trains were run on coal. If you remember some of the older movies, on a fight scene or something like that on a train, there will be a lot of coal just behind the engine, because coal is burning. There is water. The water, I just told you, the water vapor, and the vapor then shifts, moves the piston. Uh, Today we move to today the engines are mostly diesel, including on the ships. They have all moved to diesel, but earlier they were all steam based. And steam engine is the first form of engine, and it marked a move from animate power, which is either human power or animal power, to move something, to say plow, or to move, say grinding the oil mill. In an oil mill, how do you do it? It was until then either the humans or animals that used to move things. For the first time, you have um an inanimate source of energy, like the coal. You just burn coal and things are beginning to move. And yeah, that's a technological revolution. All of these are connected. All these scientific ideas and technological revolution, they're all connected. Now, I want you to visualize how at that time these changes must have really increased the faith of the common man in science and technology. Now, what happened was they realized that there are laws in the universe, and if you figure these laws, you can manipulate and improve the human life either through machines or through medicine. This faith was transferred to the social world as well. Philosophers began to think that there might be natural laws in the social world also. We just have to discover them, and once we discover them, we will be able to improve our lives, just like we have done it in physical world. Just like lives have been improved in the physical world by the discovery of laws, we will be able to discover natural laws of the social world, and that is what will improve. Once we have discovered the laws, we will be able to improve human life. Like I said, that is the promise of reason. uh, and from that was born the modern political theory. A lot of concepts that we use today were part of the Enlightenment project. So, Enlightenment has two strands to it. One is a deep faith in reason, but that faith in reason was transferred to the social world as well. And when inquiries were made into the social world, new concepts emerged. Philosophers developed new concepts when they tried to apply reason, to the social world. For instance, they challenged the whole notion of divine theory of kingship, that God made the king. They challenged it. They said, no, we all came together and we decided that we needed one person who can rule over us so that our lives will improve, which is the social. We made a social contract among ourselves, and that is how the kingship came into being. So that is, they did it through reasoning. Okay, and they did it by challenging the authority of what the church said or what the state said. Now, the other ideas that were prevalent as part of the Enlightenment and the changes that happened in the early modern Europe, some ideas that were core. We till now discussed the scientific ideas. Now we will discuss the social and political ideas, because the same thinking, the same way of looking at the universe was now transferred from the physical world to the social world. And one of the idea that came is the idea of progress. Now, until that time in human history, any civilization wanted continuity. All civilizations want, they believe that they are the best civilization, that their ideas are the best, and they don't want to change. They want continuity. They believe that their ideas, their tastes, their way of cooking, their way of being, their way of dressing, their dances, their music, their literature, they feel that is the highest, and they aim at continuing it rather than changing it. But for the first time, because of the theory of evolution given by Charles Darwin in biology, and if they said, okay, in nature, species are always improving, they are getting better and better over time, they are getting more and more efficient over time. They said, then societies also must progress. They took that idea and they said, societies also must progress. They said, no point holding on to things that were part of the past. We now want to focus on change rather than continuity. And we want to progress. We want to improve our lives more and more. If nature can do it, why can't society do it? So that is the faith. And from there came the idea of human progress. There are obviously some people who resist change, usually because of a social setup in a society. Whoever is in power, Okay, whoever is wealthy, whoever enjoys higher status in the dominance, they often tend to resist change because this social structure allowed them to be on the top. If you change social structure, it could threaten their position at the top. Someone else could, in a new game, in a new structure, someone else could come to the top, which is why usually, this is not always the case, but usually those in power, those in the dominant position, tend to be tend to ask for continuity rather than change. Okay, they will say, let us keep the society as it is. They are called conservatives. They are called conservative because they want to conserve the existing order, the existing social order, the existing social structure. They want to keep it. Those who want to change it, those who believe that change is good, they are called radicals, um, or they are called liberals. Even today, they are called liberals because in this time, in the early modern period, um, the first set of people who embraced the idea of progress, who advocated the idea of human social change is good. We should always change and try to improve and become better. One of the key concepts they used is the concept called liberty. It was first time used. We will discuss what liberty is, and which is why they were called liberals. So you have conservatives and you have liberals. Liberals are always asking for change, for improvement. Conservatives generally tend to say too much change is not good. You need continuity for the society, is what they say. And there is merit to both sides. There is merit to both sides, and that is what that is one of the things we will discuss. But so at least the commitment to change is in progress, and that idea itself is a consequence of theory of evolution. John Locke, uh, one of the 3 4 main enlightenment thinkers, he used that reasoning that I told you to understand what are the natural laws in the social world. And in asking that question, he asked, before all this society, state, these norms, these rules, before the society was born, what was there? It was in the state of nature. We were in nature, and in nature we were all free. And first and foremost, when he says man, it means man and woman. But in those days, um, it was enough to say man. Man referred to both men and women. They said man was free in the state of nature. He could do whatever he pleases, and every man was free. So that freedom is the basis of liberty. The word idea, liberty. Liberty is to be able to live without constraints, without rules. The rules can be social rules, telling you how to behave, how not to behave, what is appropriate action, what is not, how you should move, how not, how you should talk, how not, and all. Or it could be legal rules. Those social rules over time, they become coded in laws, and the laws will tell what is acceptable behavior and what is not. So both are problematic. Okay. So Locke argued that in the state of nature, man was free, there was freedom, there was liberty, and nobody could tell man what to do. So he propagated what is called natural rights. He said every individual, remember the word individual, every individual has some natural rights. Okay, just like natural laws in the universe, in the physical universe, there are natural rights that one is born with. Okay, and society can't take them away, state can't take them away, the church can't take them away. And those natural rights are, 3 of those natural rights, important ones, are right to life, right to liberty, and right to property. Today, almost every constitution in the world recognizes all the three, if not all three, at least right to life and liberty is mentioned in every single constitution. Okay, but the first time these ideas were discussed were in 16th and 17th century France. Now, right to life, because first there were these rights in the state of nature, men came together and they created state. They created state so that their life, liberty, and property are protected. So, life, liberty, and property precede the state. They are not legal rights. They are not rights that are made by the state. They are the reason why even the state was made, which is why they are natural rights. Man is born with these rights: a right to live, his corporal, his body uh, is his, and he has a right to preserve it, the right to preserve life, his own life. Um, Now, and liberty, to think. Most importantly, the right to liberty is the right to think, which is why in the Indian constitution and in other constitutions also, this liberty is again into freedom of thought, freedom of religion, freedom of speech and expression. You will constantly see these terms coming in your general studies, in paper, in your newspaper, in sociology, this in political science. They will keep coming. But understand that first time somebody thought about these, until then nobody ever thought that these rights are natural rights. Nobody thought. In fact, nobody imagined. Nobody used the word right before that. As a human right, as a natural right. Um, so, um, liberty includes liberty of thought because you are your own person. And remember, reason will tell you. So, you have an individual conscience, and nobody can tell uh, what to believe, what not to believe, what is right, what is wrong. Um, at least as far as religion is concerned, what to believe in. It is the individual's choice. Okay? The church can't tell you can only believe in this, and if you don't believe, we are going to kill you. The church can't say that anymore. Notice that in doing this, one important idea is the idea of individualism. Okay, once you say there are rights to the individual, until then, individuals never saw themselves, humans never saw themselves as individuals. They always saw themselves as member of a community, large family, and the broader community. But it is for the first time that the individual becomes the center of thought. Okay, his life in body, preservation of that life, his thought, the liberty to think, the liberty to speak his thought, the liberty to write and express. These are all part of that. And the right to property. Now, why right to property? The right to property is it's a much more contended, whether right to property is a natural right or whether it is a legal right. This is something you will do extensively in your GS. It is one of the very important topics. But for our discussion, it suffices to say that right to property is because every individual has absolute right over his body. And if his body goes and labors, works, and creates something, then the individual has poured his mind, his thought, his creativity, his skill, and his body, his physical labor, I mean, literally to transform, to either take a piece of wood and make a block out of it, or to take a piece of land, to till it and put seeds and grow. What are you doing? You're putting your labor, you're putting your physical labor into it. In other words, you're putting your sweat, your toil, your body into that, and your mind into it. Because you have mixed your physical body and your mental ideas into that labor, product of that labor is yours, because it is now mixed with your body and your mind. Therefore, John Locke argues that property is a natural right because it is mixed with an individual's physical life, the body and the mind. So that is why property, that is the reasoning behind why Locke argues that it is a natural right to property. The American Constitution did adopt this idea, um, right to life, liberty. Instead of using the word property in the American Constitution in its preamble, um, they changed for property to the pursuit of happiness. Because why are you laboring? Why does an individual labor? An individual labors, or an individual works so that um, through the fruit of his labor he will be happy. It is a pursuit of happiness. Okay, and every individual has a right to life, liberty, and property, according to these thinkers. Now, um, then you have the idea of tolerance. Again, according to Locke's principle of the social contract, the government lacked authority in the realm of individual conscience. So, like I just explained, a corollary of the belief that the government shouldn't tell what to believe, what not to believe. Locke also said the church shouldn't tell what to believe, what not to believe, whether you should go to church or not, whether a particular deity is the God or not, and how heaven and hell are there, or how. No, the church has, these are matters of faith, these are matters of belief. This is an individual's conscience, and no external authority, whether it is the state or the church, can tell what to believe in, which means they can't force, and which also means one individual can't force on another individual. And that is the basis for tolerance, which is why, if you notice, liberals, these are all liberals, because I just told you, these are all part of the belief that there is liberty of speech, liberty of expression, the right to speech, right to expression. This is all freedom rights. In our constitution, we call them different right to freedom. And individuals come together to make and they come together and they consent to give government the power to make certain rules so that we are all better off, so that every individual is better off. Now, that means every individual is equal. And that is the second keyword of enlightenment thinking and all of that, which is equality. So there is liberty, I just explained in detail. Then there is equality, which is every individual is, they have equal right to their own life and liberty. If they all come together, then they're all equal. Nobody is more than the other. They then create one person who is a sovereign. They give away a part of their right, but it is what they don't give away is the right to life or the right to liberty or the right to property, because it is in order to protect these rights, these three rights, that this new power is being made. The state is being made. We all come together into an agreement. That agreement is called the social contract. We come together and we create it. So that state can't tell us what to believe, because that will be infringement, that will be interfering in my liberty of thought, my freedom of thought, which is why tolerance is an important principle of the Enlightenment era. Then another idea is the idea of fraternity, that once we come together as a society, we are all one family. We have all come together and created this state, and the relation between all each other is because we are all equals now. The earlier setup, the feudal setup, where there were clergy and lords, and the rest of them were serfs, that has gone. Today, in the light of these new ideas, we are all equal and we are all one family. That sense of family is what is called fraternity. And this sense of fraternity created what is called a nation state. Okay, mostly because of the printing press. What happens is, with the invention of printing press, you have standardization of language. Until then, language, if you go from one town to another town, one village to another village, one region to another region in a particular geography, as you keep moving, the language changes little by little. And mostly it is spoken language because the printing press was not there. So books were not there. It was not written. So the dialect changes from geography to geography, little by little. And you can't tell where French becomes German. Okay, it is a gradual movement where German becomes Dutch. Okay, again, it's a gradual movement. But with the printing press, what happens? You need to standardize language because to write a book, you need to have clear rules of grammar and vocabulary. If you remember, the entire Telangana movement was based on the fact that the Andhra um, way of speaking and writing is imposed on the Telangana way of writing and speaking. This has been standardized. So if you take a typical newspaper, or forget about newspaper, news channel, which is why some of the channels that are Hyderabad based and Telangana based, if you notice, they tend to have programs where the Telangana accent is spoken, because the fight was that the Andhra accent, Andhra culture, and the core of that culture is in the language that is imposed upon them. Similar things happened in Europe, where once printing press starts and books begin to be written, language is standardized, both because they need to type, and the and then you have clear boundaries, or not very clear but rough boundaries emerging. What is French versus what is German? Two languages separate. What is German versus what is Dutch? Again, two languages separate very clearly. Okay, because until now, one group could talk to the immediate next group, they could talk to the, it's very much more continuous. Now it is more discrete, it is more clearly separate. And that separation, eventually, there was a movement for autonomy. And yeah, like there was separation of Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, there was separation of, or there was the birth of many nation states in Europe. The nation state was born based on the idea of fraternity, that we all belong to one community, and we need to govern ourselves. That we govern ourselves. That is the social contract, right? We come together and we are making this new state. Um, so fraternity and the idea of social contract come together to give birth to a concept of nation state. Until then, there was no concept of nation state, there were only kingdoms. Montesquieu, another French philosopher, part of the Enlightenment idea is the separation of powers. They said that, I discussed this last time also, that it is not good to keep all the powers in one person. So they made separate branches of the government, the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature, so that one will check the power of the other. It is called checks and balances. So the powers will be checked and balanced between the different branches of the government. So that is the separation of powers. Then you have constitutional government, again an idea developed by Montesquieu. He said that the Montesquieu argues that these rules, the social contract, which is all the individuals come together and they have made the state in the past, when this idea came and it caught fever, people began to believe in this idea. They began to ask, why can't we remake these rules? Because the old rules are clearly not helping us, where a few 1 or 2% of royalty and church, they enjoy all the privileges, and we are made to suffer and we are being exploited. Instead, we will create a new set of rules, we will create a new contract. That new contract is the constitution, where clearly laid rules exist of what are the rights and what is the limits of the state, things like that. So that is how the idea of constitutional government came into being. Of course, one of the things they also did was separation of church and state. They said in this new rules, because remember, in reason, you decide what is true, what is right, with the faith of reason, instead of believing in what the church says, what does tradition say, what does the Bible say. No, they said we will not accept that any longer. We will come together. The individuals come together, and they create the state. They create the constitution, which will tell how to run the state. So remember, you are aspiring to be civil servants. We are literally creatures of the constitution. The constitution has provisions that creates the civil services, and we as civil servants are part, or we are born out of the constitution, and we solely serve the constitution. Although we say we are civil servants, we are public servants, where is the public? So if the public today there is a lockdown, there is a member of the public who will come and say, no, I want to sit and enjoy on the beach. Will you serve them? No. The public to us, or the public will, the will of the public, what they want, is enshrined, is coded in one document. Actually, it is coded in many acts and laws, but those laws in turn derive their power from the constitution. So when a particular law is made by the legislature and it is not in the spirit of the constitution, the judiciary will intervene and declare it as ultra vires. Ultra vires means it is in conflict, or it is not in coherence with the constitution, and therefore it is rejected. So constitution is in some ways whom in fact, we serve the constitution. We take oath to protect the constitution. If a law and constitution are in conflict, if a particular act and the constitution are in conflict, the constitution will take always precedence, because ultimately all power for everybody, for every government servant, every minister, every judge, is coming from the constitution. And that is the idea of and that constitution, the first people who wrote that constitution, it is called Constituent Assembly. Even in India, it is called Constituent Assembly. The first time this was done, it was done in France. Remember, I told you the story where the king was dragged and killed, was guillotined, along with later the queen also. Now, once the guillotining happens, actually it happens, the Constituent Assembly is created even before the guillotining happens. The Constituent Assembly is made based on these ideas, based on the idea of liberty, on social contract, that we will make our own contract, and they create a National Constituent Assembly. I'm talking about the French National Constituent Assembly. In India also it is called as Constituent Assembly. They made their constitution, we made our constitution. Usually a Constituent Assembly is the one that is making the constitution. The American Constituent Assembly made the American Constitution. When they are making these constitutions for the first time, because until then, remember, the divine theory of kingship is that it is the religion, it is the church that legitimizes the power of the king, of the state. For the first time, they wanted the church outside the state. They said, individuals, we will come together, the common man, elected by their, the representatives of the common man come, not, if there are 1 lakh people, all 1 lakh people can't sit and discuss. So every 10,000 people will elect one man. That way, there will be 10 men who are elected, which is the root of democracy. Those 10 men then come together and they decide on what grounds to make the constitution, and that constitution will then give birth to the state. And they wanted to keep religion outside all of this process. of making the constitution, making the laws, making the state. And that separation of the state and religion is called secularism. So secularism is also an important concept of the Enlightenment. So we have the scientific ideas of Enlightenment, or you can also call this the intellectual changes of modernity, and then you have scientific ideas, and you have social and political ideas, the ideas of natural right, the idea of progress, the idea of tolerance, fraternity, separation of powers, constitutional government, and the separation of church and state, secularism. So these constitute the A, these are the ideas of Enlightenment, and B, and I want you to appreciate how a lot of these ideas are because of they are rooted in this scientific thinking and the promise of reason. And the social and political ideas are not separate. They are in some ways locked, or they in some ways are born out of scientific ideas and scientific ways of thinking. So these are the ideas. Now, usually the question will just say, the UPSC question for this topic will just ask, um, describe the intellectual changes of modernity and the birth of sociology. If it says you can divide it into scientific, scientific will get lesser space. The social and political ideas will get more space. Although the reason why we have to mention the scientific ideas is because the social and political ideas are drawing, they are, people have accepted them, people have put their faith in them because they have witnessed the power of science and technology. Okay, that is why the science and technology ideas also have to be mentioned. Don't go into details, don't start writing Charles' law, Boyle's law, theory of evolution. Theory of evolution may still be important because from there comes progress, the idea of progress. But most other laws, don't go into the details. Don't write Newton and all. You can mention them, but don't go, that's what, don't go off into the theories. Don't start writing laws of motion and all that. Just mention that these are the thinkers, these are the works, and the application of those scientific ideas were technology, technology like the steam engine, technology like modern medicine, and that led to a faith, and that faith led to using that idea of understanding or investigating natural laws in the physical world. That faith was then used for social world, and then these theories and these ideas were developed. So that is your rough answer structure.